So you can see back in here, I've got a little bit of corrosion on my positive terminal. I especially have a little bit of an issue over here, so we're going to clean that stuff up. Hi everyone, this is David, and for those of you that are new to our channel, this is Tigner Adventures, my wife Ninette, and our little kitten Tansy. We travel full-time in our motorhome, and this is our motorhome, Beulah. It's 36 feet long, and we are completely self-contained, which means we don't have to plug into a power pole. We have our own power. We generate everything here between our solar system and everything, and this is kind of the brains of the whole system. It's the batteries, and you got to keep your batteries in good condition, or you end up having to spend a lot of money for more batteries. So these particular batteries are lead acid batteries. These are 6-volt Trojan batteries, and they do a great job, have a lot of amp hours and everything. They're only about $120 a piece, and so that's why, you know, for $240, you know, they will last quite a while compared to a lithium battery being, you know, somewhere around $800 to $1,000 for, you know, so that's like, what, $600 more. But some of the drawbacks to lead, they're a lot heavier than lithium. They take a lot longer to charge up, and in this particular case, because these are flooded lead acid, I have to keep filling them up with water, and sometimes that water boils out or just sloshes out from, you know, some of the roads I might drive on. And so we've got to kind of keep the compartment clean and keep our connections nice and clean. All right, let me stop here for just a minute, and I want to talk about battery acid specifically. Okay, make sure you have your safety glasses, put on some old clothes, because you see what it's doing to the batteries. That's not what you want it to do to your eye. If it happens to splash in your eye or get on your clothes, it will disintegrate your clothes. It won't happen today on your clothes, but they'll just start, you know, they'll just kind of fall apart. So if you do get acid on you or your clothes, then just put some clean water on there, and it'll help neutralize that acid, so that you know, take care of that. And if you get that in your eyes, make sure and flush your eyes out. So that's just kind of a little safety thing. It's much better to wear the safety goggles and just be really careful. Also, if you notice here, I've got these little stems that are sticking up on mine. That's how I actually measure my water levels on my batteries. So make sure that you don't happen to break those off, because then you got to replace them. So just got to be careful working around everything, but it's a real simple job, and we're going to go ahead and take care of that. So you can see back in here, I've got a little bit of corrosion on my positive terminal. I've got a little bit of spilling going on in here I need to clean up. I especially have a little bit of an issue over here where some acids got on the side there, and the rubber coatings wore off the wall, I guess, and kind of got in there and starting to corrode it. So we're going to clean that stuff up, and to do so, we're going to use a mixture here. If you look, I'm mixing up within this jar of water. I'm going to put some of this baking soda in there. It doesn't take a lot, but you're just going to kind of pour it in there and mix it around, and just to kind of get it dissolved. And then that's what we're going to use to kind of pour over the battery and, you know, wipe off all that stuff. So what it does is it neutralizes the battery acid, and then we can kind of use some nice clean water and just clean things up at the end. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this negative. This is our negative wire that connects the batteries to the actual ground of the coach. And by taking this one off here, it automatically disconnects everything else in the coach. I've turned everything off inside, and so we're going to take that off, and then we'll go from there. Now, because I am using 6-volt lead acid batteries, I am connecting them together in series. So you'll see right here, we have this black going from the negative on this battery over to the positive on that battery, and then this negative from here going over to the positive on this battery, and this is actually creating a parallel connection. And so basically what I want to do is I want to make sure I take a picture of how this is all set up, and then that way I can put it right back the way it was, which is very important. Now, one thing I want to do is also point out, this is the last positive connection that actually goes to the inverter. So that little box on top there is a fuse that goes off to my inverter. So everything's coming off this one post here. So when that starts building up a lot of corrosion, then you don't get as good a connection, your batteries don't charge as well, and you don't get as much energy out of the batteries because you get all this resistance that's building up in the system. So, but I want to make sure and take a note of how I got all that put together so I can put it back together the same exact way once I clean it up. So I've pulled each one of the cables off the batteries now, and I've just laid them out here on the ground outside the coach in the order that they were. So I'm just going to clean them up, and then I can put them back on the battery right back where they were and tighten those down. So this is the fuse that was on the positive connection there, and it's an inline 300 amp fuse, and it actually goes to my inverter and also to my charge controller for my solar. And if I can get this just right so not too much glare on it, you can see how much corrosion is just building up on this piece alone. Even though I put dielectric grease on them, after a while that just kind of wears off or dissipates somehow, and then things start building up a little bit, so it's important to keep things clean. Alright, so you can see that I have now removed all of the wiring off my batteries. Everything's pulled to the side, I've made note of everywhere, and I'm actually going to start cleaning this stuff up now. So I'm going to start in this back corner over here, and you'll notice that as I pour this on, how it starts bubbling up. You can see how that bubbles up. I think I need to go ahead and move these straps off. So I'm going to pull these straps off. These straps actually anchor the battery so they don't move around any more than they do, I guess, but it's to keep them nice and tight. So I've pulled those off, and I'm just going to kind of continue to just pour this around here, just to kind of try to neutralize everything. I'm not doing a lot, I'm just pouring it here and there, and then I'm just going to wipe it off. So I'll kind of sop it up until I can get this nice and clean, and that's our goal today. So I'll just keep doing this on all the batteries, and then I'll show you when I'm actually done with them all. Alright, so you can see that I've cleaned that up nice and pretty now. Got rid of all the corrosion stuff, cleaned off all the terminals, and I am ready to actually clean the cable ends. So I've already done the ones in the back there, but I've got to do the individual ones. If you notice, they get a little bit of corrosion on them also, so it's important to clean that all off, and so use some of your soda water to do that with a wire brush, and then we'll be ready to put some dielectric grease on there and put these all back together. So all I'm doing is I'm dipping these into this just to kind of neutralize any acid that got onto this cable, and then I'm just going to kind of wire brush it just to make sure that it's nice and clean. And you can kind of see there's dielectric grease on there, so if that's still there and everything's good, then there's not a lot to worry about. But on this side over here, we've got a lot of corrosion, so we're going to dip that in there, and then we're going to go ahead and just wire brush that off. And if it's too thick, you can also use a razor blade to kind of scrape it, or something to kind of scrape on there a little bit, but you just want to get rid of it. I'm going to do that to all the cables, make sure they're nice and clean, and then we'll proceed. Looks good. Put it back in my little diagram here so I don't lose the place of where they go. So another thing you want to do when you're actually checking the cables is when you're cleaning them, is also to check them, because look at this one here. I don't know why this has been worn off. I don't think it wore off there. Something might have chewed it off, or it just kind of made it had a split there when I put it on. So I will go ahead and replace this heat shrink with a new piece, because I want to make sure and keep everything out of sight of this little area right here. And because once it gets into all that copper wire, then it's a lot harder to clean them, and in most cases you have to just throw the cable away and put a new one in. So maintenance is better. Alright, so this is what it looks like after I taken the heat shrink off. So you can just see that was clamped on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it with a piece of heat shrink. One thing you need to note on this is you want to make sure it's big enough to slide over there just barely, because it's going to shrink down. What you do is apply heat to it, and then it will shrink down around everything. Now this particular one I don't believe has glue in it. I usually like to use heat shrink that's got glue in there. So if you look at like this one, you'll see the glue that's oozed out a little bit as it's shrunk on there, and that's a pretty heavy duty one because it's a lot heavier wire, but that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm just going to heat shrink this down, and then one thing to note on this also is that you want to make sure to cut this with scissors. Okay, I used to do it like with a razor blade, but if you make little nicks in there at all, then as it heats down, it'll just rip, and that might have been what happened to this before. But I've got a little heat gun here. I'm going to heat it up. You'll see how this just kind of conforms. See it just shrinking down around there. You don't want to do it too much either, because you can make it so it just gets too pliable, or just kind of starts ripping apart anyway. So, but that's about it. If you look at this now, you can see how it's nice and sealed all around there, so it'll help keep everything out. If you use the glue, then it helps keep the water out of there, and that's why I like to use those. But I don't have any of that with me right now, so. But at least that repairs that, so we're good there. And where this is sitting, we shouldn't have too much issue as far as water and things, because it's up above everything. So anyway, we're ready to put them in. Alright, so using this dielectric grease, we're just putting some on each one of the terminals, and we want to make sure that we cover the inside and outside of these little holes really good on all of the different connectors, and then spread the grease around. So you can see I've put it on this one here. Is that one showing? Yeah, right here. So I'm just going to kind of move that all around there too. The dielectric grease is a grease that keeps, seals out all the moisture and the battery acid and things like that, but it still allows it to make a great connection. So that's why we're doing that. So we're going to do that throughout everything and start hooking all the stuff back up again. So as soon as I get them ready to tighten down, we'll talk about that. I almost forgot this, but we want to actually test these batteries and make sure that they're all the same. So I have a tester right up here. I think you can see that. The sun's starting to come out, so it's kind of hard to tell, but I'm going to put the tester leads on each side, and it's 6.5 volts. These are 6-volt batteries, so it's 6.5. I've actually gone through and I've tested every battery, and all of my batteries are 6.5. And that's important because if one of them's lower or higher, or whatever the case may be, they should be about 6.5. That's what a standard 6-volt should probably register. So if they're all the same, that's great. That means they're keeping balanced as they're charging and discharging. If one's lower than the other or higher than it's typically not going to be higher, because like if you put a new battery in, it was higher, then an older battery would pull the newer battery down. So you want to make sure that all your voltages are good, and the big thing is to make sure they're all even. So we're getting that with these, so I'm happy. I'm going to go ahead and finish putting all the connectors on now, actually linking them all together. So I have now tightened up I got all the cables on there, and I've tightened up the ends. I want to make sure they're nice and snug. I don't want to over tighten them. I just want to make sure they're nice and tight. So actually when I try to move the cable, it shouldn't move. So if I kind of look here and kind of wiggle them and stuff, they're not moving. That's what's important. So not too tight, because you don't want to strip it out, but you want to make sure they're nice and tight, got a good connection there. So now once those are all done, then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the final ground that goes to the frame, I'm going to connect it to the battery. And when I do that, I want to actually do that fairly quickly. I want to just kind of set it right on there, because there shouldn't be anything on, but if there is, then I don't want it doing a lot of sparking or anything like that. So I'm just going to do that, and then we'll see what the end result is. Okay, so I did get a little bit of a spark there, and I think a lot of that probably is because I have my little controller board up there that's monitoring what voltage goes through here. I'm now making a connection between, you know, other devices in the rig and the ground on the frame, and so, but that's why you put it on really quick. You just put it on and then you bolt it down nice and tight. So all of my connections are nice and tight. If you look in here now, everything looks nice and clean, and so that's what we were shooting for, and we got nice tight connections. So now I want to talk about this just a little bit. You'll notice that I have these little orange caps on here, and what they do is they've got little floats in them, and this is something I added to the batteries. So this is what usually comes with the battery. One of these two type of connectors will be popped on there, and this is what I've actually put in. So I've changed those out, and the reason I did that is because this is flooded lead acid, and so you have to keep maintaining them, meaning that you need to check the levels. It's a lot simpler if you have a system that is showing you what the level is all the time. What I used to do is I had this little, I don't know if I can get that to not be reflected. You can see how I got this little piece of wiring sheath, and I put a little mark on it right there, and I would set it down, and it would be, the mark would be even with the top of the lid, and then I would see if it actually touched the water, and if the water didn't move, especially when I was looking in the way back there, I have to crawl all the way in there. So I would put a blanket over the first portions of the batteries, crawl all the way back in there, and try to look down inside the hole to try to make sure that I got the water level correct. By buying these are made for 6 volt. If you have 12 volt batteries, they have yellow ones that you can buy. I got them at the Quartzsite show, but they are also on Amazon, same exact price. So anyway, I purchased those, and now all I have to do is I take off this little rubber cap right here, or I'll show you on this one here, this rubber cap, and I can put a squeeze bottle on. So I put this little squeeze bottle set up on there, and it's put into my gallon of distilled water, and I can put in a little bit at a time to bring those floats back up. So you'll notice that this float back here is just a little bit low. So the key is to make sure that the water is above the lead plates. Okay, anytime it starts, if it ever gets below that, that's when you start getting corrosion on the plates and the batteries are ruined. These batteries here are over 3 years old. And so when people tell you that, oh, you've got to switch out, lead's not the way to go, you want to spend $1,000 each on the lithium because your leads don't last, that's not true. That is not a reason to switch to lithium. There's other reasons to switch to lithium, like these are about 60 pounds or so each, so that's a lot of weight on this side of the coach. That's one reason to switch. But you know, as far as the batteries, they can, if you take care of these and you keep them charged up and things, they'll last for years. I know one guy that's had his for almost 25 years. So, you know, that's just kind of a myth. What they're saying is most people don't take care of their batteries, and so they only last 1 or 2 years, and that is a true statement. Where lithium, you don't have to do a lot. There's still maintenance involved with lithium, but it's not as much as what you have to do with lead acid. So just be aware of that, and make your choices the way you want to. I'd love to have lithium. At this point, I can't afford to justify spending, you know, the $1,000. I mean, to get the same as I got here, I'd have to spend at least $3,000, and so it's not. It's hard to cost justify that at this point when these are working so well. So I'll just stay with these, and I'll just make them work. Okay, I want to talk about how this is wired for just a minute. So I mentioned these are 6 volt batteries. So there's one 6 volt, one 6 volt. I'm putting them together with this black cable right here that makes 12 volts. Then I move out and I pull this one over here to this side and hook these together. This is another 12 volts, another 12 volts up here, and then I just put them all together. So I'm only doing 12 volts for the whole system, but what's happening is each set of 12 volt batteries is 120 amp hours. So by increasing that, you know, putting all 3 of them together, so I'm putting those in can't remember if it's series or parallel. I mean, I've got two different things going here, but from battery to battery is series, and then coming from those back is parallel. By doing that, I'm adding all those amps up. I'm not increasing the voltage, but I'm adding the amps. So I get 300 or 120 times 3, so 760 volts. Is that right? I get all those 120s added together, gives me the 720, gives me 310 or 20 or whatever. Boy, my math's horrible. But anyway, lead acid, you only get to use half of your lead acid, so that's a disadvantage compared to lithium. So you have to have extra batteries to add all that up. And so in my particular case, by wiring it the way I have, I do get up to 310 amp hours of usage before I should charge these. And so that's the 50% mark on my batteries. Well, so that's it. We're all done. Everything's all wired back the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to go ahead and put my ties back down, tighten those up, and then we're ready to go. We're turn our power back on, and life's good. Everything's maintained. It's definitely important to keep the water at the right levels on the batteries, but if you just do this little maintenance thing, and you don't have to do it that often, you just have to kind of look at how things are, and if you're starting to get some corrosion, then go ahead and take everything apart and clean everything well. I think the reason I was getting some corrosion on a couple of those connectors is probably not putting enough grease on there. So it's better to, I mean, once you put the bolts on there and tighten those down, then put some dielectric grease all around that also. That just helps keep everything sealed and keeps a nice tight fitting. Also, I had one of my cables that when I went to undo the little nut, it was actually loose. So I have no idea why that was loose, but I guess, you know, just vibrating around. That particular wire is kind of by the side of the cabinet here, and so maybe the wire just moving up and down, or the cabinet moving there as the batteries might vibrate going down some of these darn washboard roads. Anyway, it made that loose. So it's interesting. So that's something I need to kind of keep track of, and you might want to keep track of, is to make sure that your fittings are all nice and snug. That way you get the best connection and stuff, and gets the best production. So hopefully this is of value to you, and hopefully you'll be able to do this yourself. If you have other people do it, it gets kind of expensive, so it's a really simple little job, and you're really not going to hurt anything. I just urge you to take a picture of everything beforehand. That way when you put it back together, you can compare the picture to the way you put it back together, or do it at the time you're putting it together so you don't short circuit anything. And you know, it's not rocket science, so you'll be able to do it just fine. So anyway, hope to see you down the road, and thanks for watching.